Welcome back, students. This is Dr. Mercado speaking, and this is Accounting 2402, Principles of Managerial Accounting. And this is my last lecture that I'm going to be recording over Chapter 20, which deals with cost, volume, profit analysis. The problem that we're going to be covering is problem 22A. Okay. Now, this is an important problem because let me just pull my file over here. Let me just make sure before I open my mouth. Yes. You are going to be seeing this problem on your test. Okay, so make a note of this. Problem 22A will be on your test number 1. So it's very important that we understand how to do it. So that is why I'm taking the time to cover it here with you. Okay, usually the problems that I select to cover on my lectures are important, critical problems that I want students to ensure that they understand. That's why I go through the trouble of recording my lectures. Okay, but this problem in specific is going to be on your next test. It is a long problem. So this lecture is going to be longer than my other lectures because this is a problem. And I've already set everything up for you in Excel, I'm sorry. That way it just makes it easier for me to explain it as I go. But, if you need to set this structure up when you're working your homework problem, it's going to take you even a little bit longer, okay? So, once again, problem 22A. I hope all of you are doing well, and let's get ready to start solving this problem, okay? So this problem deals with break-even sales under present and proposed conditions. Okay, it says Portman Company operating at full capacity sold 1 million units at a price of $188 per unit during the current year. Its income statement is as follows. We had sales of 188 million, cost of goods sold of 100 million, gross profit of 88 million, expenses, we had selling expenses 16 million, admin expenses 12 million, total expenses 28 million, and our operating income was 60 million. The division of costs between variable and fixed are as follows. Our cost of goods sold is 70% variable, 30% fixed. Our selling expenses are 75% variable, 25% fixed. Our admin expenses are 50-50. Management is considering a plant expansion program for the following year that will permit an increase of 11,280,000 in yearly sales. The expansion will increase fixed costs by $5 million, but will not affect the relationship between sales and variable costs. Okay. Now there is a lot of requirements. There's 8 requirements in this problem. We're going to go one by one. Okay. That way we can get it figured out. Okay. So our first requirement asks us, determine the total variable cost and the total fixed cost for the current year. Okay. So I have set up the first part up here. Let me go ahead and move that over a little bit. Okay. So I've set it up. I've got my components, my cost of goods sold, my selling expenses, and my admin expenses. These are the costs that we have to split between variable and fixed. Cost of goods sold, selling, and admin expenses, okay? So I've got them both listed here. The top part is going to be calculating your variable cost. The bottom one is going to be calculating your fixed cost. Now, total cost, okay? My total cost for my cost of goods sold is $100 million. And that is going to be the same for both scenarios, okay? 100 million is my total cost for cost of goods sold. Your selling expenses are 16 million, okay? So that's going to be 16 million for both. Okay? And then my admin expenses are provided here. And my admin expenses are 12 million. Okay. And that 12 million is going to apply for both. Okay. So I have my cost entered in my first column. I'm going to multiply it by my either variable cost or fixed cost. So for variable cost, my cost of goods sold are 70%. For my selling expenses, my variable costs are 75%. And then for my admin expenses, it's 50%, okay? Now, I had already entered some formulas. Let me delete them. That way we can just see what we're doing, okay? So what are we doing? Well, what I do is I get my total cost and I multiply it by my variable cost, and that gives me 70 million. Okay, so out of the 100 million cost of goods sold, 70% of that are going to variable, which is 70 million. Okay, selling expenses, we've got 16 million in selling expenses. 75% is variable, so that means that I'm going to get 16 million times 75%. That means 12 million of those are going to be your variable cost. And for your admin, it's going to be your 12 million times 50%. Okay, so your total variable cost is $88 million. Okay, we're going to do the same thing, and now these numbers, let me just reference. These numbers are coming from right here, variable. Okay, now I'm going to do my fixed costs. For my fixed costs, I've got 30% is for cost of goods sold, 25% is for selling expenses, and 50% for admin. We're going to multiply once again the total cost times your fixed cost percentage, and that gives me 30 million for cost of goods sold. For selling expenses, it's 16 million times 25%. That's 4 million. And then for admin expenses, it's going to be your 12 million times your 50%. That is 6 million. Okay, so your total fixed cost is $40 million. Okay, so now we know that our variable cost is 88 million. Our fixed cost is 40 million. Okay, that is requirement 1. Determine the variable cost and the total fixed cost for the current year. My total variable cost is 88 million. My total fixed cost is 40 million. Okay. Now, requirement 2. Determine the unit variable cost and B, the unit contribution margin for the current year. Okay. So to get that, we're going to get our sales minus our variable cost, and that will give us our contribution margin. Okay. So how much do we have in sales? According to the problem, we had sales of 188 million. Where am I getting my sales figure from? That is coming straight from the problem, right there. Okay, 188. Okay, so we've got our sales, and then we've got our variable cost. Our variable cost was calculated in the first requirement. Our variable cost is $88 million. So we're going to subtract. So I'm going to put this in parentheses. That way I know this is a subtraction. Okay. And then that will give us our contribution margin. So then that's going to be $100 million. Okay. Now we're going to divide by the number of units. Okay. At 188 million sales, how many units did we sell? Well, according to the problem, we sold 1 million units. Right here, it says 1 million units were sold. Okay. Okay. So now I can get the unit variable cost and the contribution margin for the year. Okay. So now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to divide my 188 million divided by 1 million units. That gives me $188. The variable cost is going to be 88 million divided by 1 million units. That'll be 88, and my contribution margin will be $100. Okay. So for requirement 2, they're asking us for letter A, what is the unit variable cost? So that would be requirement 8. Unit variable cost would be $88. Okay. Now requirement B says the unit contribution margin for the year. The unit contribution margin will be $100. Okay. So You're going to get your total amount divided by the number of units that were sold during that specific period, and that's going to give you your per unit variable cost and the unit contribution margin for the year. Okay, so that is requirement 2. Okay, requirement 3. Compute the break-even sales in units for the current year. Okay, break-even sales. How many units do I have to sell to break even? Okay, so for that we have our fixed cost over our unit contribution margin. Okay, so do we have our fixed cost amount provided? Okay, no we don't, but we calculated it in requirement A, or the first part of the requirement. According to our calculations, our total fixed cost is $40 million. So those $40 million are going to go over here, fixed costs. Okay, so my fixed costs were $40 million. Okay, and I'm going to divide by the unit contribution margin. And the unit contribution margin was calculated in requirement number 2, which was $100. Okay, so that's coming from there. Okay, so then let's get our calculators. That's 40, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 divided by 100. That gives me 400,000 units, okay, to break even. So to break even, I need to sell 400,000 units. Okay. Requirement 4. Compute the break-even sales units under the proposed program for the following year. So this proposed program is telling us that it would allow an increase of 11,280,000 in yearly sales, but it comes at a price of 5 million fixed cost. Okay, so let me go back to requirement 4. So now we've got our break-even sales in units. Okay, we're going to do the same thing. My fixed costs. Okay, so your fixed cost is going to be, once again, your 40 million. Okay, fixed cost, 40 million. But then the problem says that if we go with this proposal, we're going to have an increase in fixed cost of $5 million. So my fixed cost is going to go up by 5 million. And I'm going to divide by my unit contribution margin, which the unit contribution margin we calculated was $100 right there. Okay. Okay, so we've got the 40 million plus the 5, and then we're going to divide by the unit contribution margin, which is 100. Okay, so then that gives me 45, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then we're going to divide by 100, and let's see what we get. 45, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, divided by 100. That gives me 450,000 units. Okay, so requirement 4 says compute the break-even sales in units under the proposed program for the year. So before this proposal, to break even, we had to sell 400,000 units. Under this new proposal, which has higher costs, we would have to sell 450,000 units to break even. Okay, so it's impacting us by having to sell an extra 50,000 units. Okay, requirement 5. Determine the amount of sales units that would be necessary under the proposed program to realize $60 million of operating income that was earned in the current year. Okay. So for this, we've got our fixed cost plus our target profit over our unit contribution margin. So my fixed costs are $40 million plus my target profit. The target profit in this particular problem was how many millions? 60 million. That's how much we want to realize, $60 million. And the unit contribution margin is the $100 that we had been calculating, and that is coming from my contribution margin calculation right here of 100. Okay, so be very careful because that number is used frequently. Make sure it is accurate when you calculate your solutions for your homework. Okay, so we've got 45 million divided by 100. That gives me 450,000 units. Okay. And then we were working on number 5. For the fixed cost plus my target profit over our contribution margin, and then that's going to give us, that's 40 million plus 60 million. That's 100 million. Okay. And we're going to divide by 100, which is my unit contribution margin. Okay. So then that's going to give me 100, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 divided by 100. Let me see. Maybe I missed a number. 60 plus 40, that's 100 million. 100, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. And we're dividing by 100. And that will give me $1 million. I mean, a million units. I'm sorry. A million. Okay. 1 million units. Okay. So requirement 5 says, determine the amount of sales units that will be necessary under the proposed program to realize the 60 million of operating income that was earned in the current year. Okay. So if we want to determine the amount of that will be necessary under the proposed program to realize the 60 million. Okay, so if we want to realize the 60 million income, we would have to sell an additional 1 million units. Okay, that will cover our fixed cost and allow us to obtain our target profit, 1 million units. Okay. Okay, number 6, requirement 6. Determine the maximum operating income possible with the expanded plant. What is the maximum income we can generate with this expansion that has been proposed? Okay. Okay, for that, we're going to go ahead and we're going to start off with our sales. Okay. Now, our sales, we started off with $188 million. Where am I getting those 188 million from? From the over here, sales, $188 million in sales. Okay. Now, if we accept this expansion, we're going to have an extra 11,280,000 in sales. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add that over. And let's see what that gives us. 188, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 plus 11,280. That gives me 199,280. Okay. Next, I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna deduct my fixed cost. Now, your fixed cost, we had fixed cost of how much? We had fixed cost of 40 million. Okay, according to our problem, we had fixed cost of 40 million. Okay, fixed costs. Oh, sorry, I'm putting in the wrong field. Wrong. This is for down here. Okay, fixed costs. So we have fixed costs of 40 million. And then the problem said that if we got or we proceeded with this recommendation, our fixed costs were going to increase by 5 million. Okay. So I'm going to add 5 million. So then that's going to give me 40 million plus 5 million. That gives me 45 million. Okay. Now I've got my variable cost. Okay. Now for this one, we need to do an extra calculation. I'm going to put the calculation down here on the bottom. Okay. Okay. So for my variable cost, I need to do a calculation. Okay. So now for my variable cost, I know that, let me see, how can I explain this? Okay. Variable cost, fixed cost, variable cost. Okay, let me see. So what are they asking us in number 6? Determine the maximum operating income possible with the expanded plant. With the expanded plant. Okay, so we've got the expanded plant. Okay, with the expanded plant, we are generating $1 million. Okay, let me just do a quick calculation here. So we've got 188, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 divided by $1 million. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's 188. Okay. Okay. So let's see. Let's brainstorm. I don't remember. 11 million. So we have to calculate our variable costs. Variable costs. Oh, I got it. Okay, I found it. So they're giving us this new number here. It says management is considering a plan expansion program for the following year that will permit an increase of 11,280,000 in yearly sales. Okay, so insert. Let me see. I was like, where is that number that I need? It is being provided to us. I was like, okay. So it's saying that we have it. We are with the proposal. We're gonna have 11,280,000 in yearly sales. Okay. So we're gonna get that sales figure 11,280,000, and I'm gonna go ahead. I'm gonna put this in parentheses because I'm gonna do some calculations, and then I'm gonna divide by my sales per unit cost that we had already calculated up here, which is my $188. Okay, my sales per unit cost of 188. Okay, and then I'm going to add the 1,000,000 units that we calculated in requirement 5. Requirement 5 was asking us determine the amount of sales that would be necessary under the proposed program to realize $60 million of operating income. Well, we need that one extra $1 million, 1 million units in sales. Okay, so I'm going to add that 1 million. And let's see what we get. Let me see. There we go. Oh, sorry about that. Where's my calculator? Here we go. Okay, so it's 11,280,000. 1, 2, 3. And that is to remember the 11,280,000. I didn't know where I was getting that number. I was so many numbers that are provided. The 11,280,000, that is the what its management is considering part of the expansion program, and it's going to allow us an increase of that amount in yearly sales. So that represents your new sales figure, your 11,280,000, your new sales figure. You're going to divide by your unit variable. It's 188. The unit variable cost over here per unit, the sales per unit cost of 188 in requirement 2. Okay, and then I'm going to add the $1 million required units to be sold to be able to attain that target that management wants. Okay, and then let's see what we get in our calculator. That gave us 11,280,123 divided by 188 plus $1 million. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That gives me 1,060,000. Okay, units. Okay, 1,060,000 units. Now, once I've got my 1,060,000 units, I'm going to multiply that by right here by my variable cost per unit, which is your $88. Okay, $88. So we're going to multiply that by $88. Okay, and let's see what that gives us. Sorry, I don't know why I'm clicking all over the place today. Okay, so it'll be 1,060,000, 1, 2, 3 times 88. That gives me 93,280,000. That represents your variable costs. Okay, so we've got 45 million fixed costs. We've got 93,280,000 variable cost. Okay, so then your total cost, and because these are costs, I'm gonna add them together, and I'm gonna put them in parentheses. Okay, so let me just add them here on the calculator. 45, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 plus 93,280,000. That gives me 138,280. And I'm going to put that in parentheses. $138,280, because this is my fixed and variable costs are subtracted from your sales to be able to calculate your operating income. So therefore, your operating income will be your new sales minus your variable and fixed costs combined. That will give you operating income of $61 million. Okay. So requirement 6. So remember, we are operating at full capacity. At full capacity, we're selling 1 million units, okay? So those are the 1 million units that we are incorporating down here. Regardless, we are working at maximum capacity. Those 1 million units must be produced. Then on top of that, we have that excess capacity, which is what we are incorporating into this new program. So first, we are already manufacturing or selling 1 million units a year, okay? 1 million. That is our base. Okay, we're going to be selling 1 million regardless, and then on top of that million, we also have variable costs for the extras. Okay, that's giving us 1,060,000 units. So now for requirement number 6, it's saying determine the maximum operating income possible with the expanded plant. The maximum income we can generate is $61 million. That will include our sales, our updated sales figure, which is our original sales of 188 plus the 11,280,000 of the expansion. And then our fixed costs are going up by 5 million. That'll be 45 million. Our variable costs are also increasing based on the units. We have more units, so we have a higher variable cost. And then that will give us our maximum operating income of $61 million. Okay. Now number 7. If the proposal is accepted and sales remain at the current level. So we accept the proposal, we pass it through, but sales do not increase. Sales remain at the current level. what will the operating income or loss be for the following year? Okay, so my present operating income. Your present operating income is provided to you in the problem. Your operating income is $60 million. Okay. Less any additional fixed costs. We did have additional fixed costs, and those fixed costs were $5 million. We have fixed costs of $5 million. Okay. Okay. So then that means that our operating income would be $55 million. Okay. So our present operating income is $60 million. And we're going to subtract the additional fixed cost that we had to incur, which is $5 million. That will give us an operating income of $55 million. So we decided to expand our plant, but our sales didn't increase, but our expenses did. So we're going to go from operating income of $60 million to $55 million based on that decision. Okay. And with us having a potential of making 61 million the highest. So is the risk really worth it? Okay, right now you're making 60 million. Do you want to go through the additional expenses to potentially earn that $1 million? Okay, and are we going to be able to produce or sell those extra units that we're manufacturing? Okay. Now the last and final part says, based on the data given, would you recommend accepting the proposal? Okay, so there's a lot of numbers going on here. Okay, let's go back and let's see. Okay, so the first part is pretty straightforward. We've got our breakdown of our variable costs and our fixed costs. Okay, now requirement 2, this is where we calculate our contribution margin. We've got our sales per unit of 188, which is, it ties to this number over here, which is correct. Okay, the 188 is that number right there. Okay, so that is correct. Our sales per unit is $188. My variable cost per unit is $88. So my contribution margin is $100. Okay. Now, how many units did we have to break even? Well, we had to sell 400,000 units to break even. Okay. That was calculated fixed cost over units contribution margin. The break-even sales in units was our fixed cost over our contribution margin under the proposed program. And under the proposed program, we had to incur an extra $5 million in fixed costs. So that was $45 million over 100. My unit contribution margin is $100, and that's the number in red. Okay, and then that gave me 450,000 units. Okay. And then we have our sales units. And then for requirement 5, we had a target profit. For requirement 5, we had a target profit of 60 million. How many units do we have to sell to be able to generate $60 million? Okay, and according to this, we had to sell 1 million units. Okay, 1 million units to achieve that $60 million mark. Okay, now for requirement 6, determine the maximum operating income possible with the expanded plant option. Okay, so I know that first I'm going to look at my sales. My old sales were 188 million. Based on the expansion, I'm going to have an additional 11,280,000 in sales. That's going to give me 199,280. My fixed costs were the 40 million plus the 5 million additional. That's 45 million. For this one, we had to calculate our variable cost, and those 11,280,000 is the increase in yearly sales. So my yearly sales increase divided by the 188 is the unit sales price. Okay, I'm selling it at 188. Okay, and I know I'm selling 1 million of those goods. So you're selling 1 million of those units. Okay, so I know that I've got 1,060,000 units. Okay, now once I've got my 1,060,000 units for my variable costs, I can multiply by my variable cost per unit, which is what we calculated. Variable cost per unit is 88. Okay, and then that will give us 93,280,000. we add the two costs together, the 45 million and the 93,280,000. That gives me 138,280. And the reason it's in parentheses because these are expenses. Okay, so 199,280 minus the 138,280 will give me 61 million operating income. Okay. Okay, so let's go back with the analysis. So what does it say? Let me see. Based on the data given, would you recommend accepting the proposal? Okay, let's see what we're going to type here. Okay. In favor of accepting the proposal, there is a possibility of increasing operating income from 60 million to 61 million. However, there are various points against the proposal. Okay, so yes, my operating income can go from 60 million to 61 million, like we calculated in requirement 6. But is it worth it? Okay, so it says here, the break-even point increases by 50,000 units. Okay, so if we recall over here, if I wanted to break even, I had to sell 400,000 units. Okay, and under the proposed program, if I wanted to break even, I would have to sell 450,000 units. I would have to sell 50,000 extra units to cover those extra costs. Okay, so the break-even point would increase by 50,000 units. That's from, let me see, that is from 400,000 units. From 400 to 450,000 units. Also, if future sales remain at the current level, the operating income of 60 million will decline to 55 million. Okay, what am I talking about here? If future sales remain the same at the current level, the operating income of 60 million will decline to 55 million. Well, right now, selling 1 million units, we're making operating income of 60 million. Okay? Okay. And then if our sales remain the same, okay, what we calculated in requirement 7, if our sales remain the same, but we still have to cover that additional fixed cost, our operating income is going to drop to 55 million. Okay, so that's not good. We don't want to see a decline in our operating income. Okay. So, therefore, the company should determine the sales potential if the additional product is produced, and then evaluate the advantages and disadvantages provided. Okay, so are we sure we can increase our sales? Okay, because if we're not sure that we can increase our sales, then there's no point of us expanding the plant. If we see that customers are constantly asking for more product, more of our product, then maybe yes. But if we're not sure we can handle selling the extra units, then the expansion program would not be a good option for us. Okay. based on all of the data provided. Okay, because our sales are not going to increase significantly based on the numbers provided. And we do run a risk of not being able to sell those excess, yet having to incur the additional fixed cost of $5 million with it that we're not going to be able to recuperate. Okay, so there's a lot of calculations in this problem. Please analyze it carefully. The different requirements, the break-even numbers. The only thing I think of confusion here is this calculation here where we're getting the increased number of sales. The 11,280,000 is coming from our revised yearly sales. We're dividing it by our $188, which is our sales per unit cost, which is the 188 provided up here on the problem as well. And this is what we calculated our requirement to. And then that will get, and once we get that, we add the $1 million units. We have 1,000,000 units that are being sold. So I'm going to add those 1,000,000 units that are being sold to get my total units. Once you get your total units, you multiply by 88, which is your variable cost per unit calculated in requirement 2. Okay. Everything else is pretty straightforward. There's a lot of risk here. An analysis needs to be made if we're able to support selling the additional product, okay, before we make a decision. Okay, so that is it. It is long. Please make sure that you review it carefully, and if you have any questions, do not hesitate to reach out to me. Okay, take your time. There's the check my work figure in Cengage being provided. Please make sure that you work through the entire problem before you use check my work. That way you can see what areas you have right, what areas you have wrong, and you have more opportunities to make those corrections. You have 2 attempts, and I always keep the highest grade earned. So if you didn't do so well in the first attempt, use the second attempt provided to practice. And then I'll always keep the highest grade. So it won't affect you if you do worst on your second attempt. But at least you're able to practice problems. Like this problem is going to be on your test. You can practice it. You can lay it out however you like, so you can be ready for when the exam comes. Okay. So that is basically it for this lecture. I hope all of you continue enjoying chapter 20. There's a lot of very useful information in this chapter. And if you have any questions, concerns, I'm available. Have a wonderful rest of your week. Thank you.